Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Dojo Live. Today is Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. I'm Tulio Siragusa, broadcasting from Southern California, joined today by Carlos Ponce in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Hi, Carlos. Welcome back.
Thank you, Tulio.
And
Pleasure to be here.
and of course, our guest, this is why we do this. Our guest is Ayal Yogev, who is the CEO and co-founder of Anjuna. Welcome, Ayel, to the show.
Thanks, Tulio. It's good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So we're going to be talking about cloud computing, specifically about the security around cloud computing. But before we do that, let's get to know you a little bit and get to know your company a little bit. Let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ayel. Let the audience get to know you a bit.
Yeah, of course. So I've been in enterprise security in that space for the last 20 some years. I started in the government sector. I was in Unit 8200, which is the Israeli equivalent of the NSA. And after a few years there, I moved to the private sector and mostly did product management for enterprise security companies. I was at Imperva for the 3 years leading up to the IPO. I was then at Lookout, which is a mobile security company. From there, I moved to OpenDNS to manage their umbrella product management team. And OpenDNS eventually got acquired by Cisco, and I actually spent a few years at Cisco managing the product management team in charge of cloud security for Cisco. And after that, I moved back into the startup. I'm a startup guy, so I had to move back to the startup space, and I moved to a company called SafeBreach as their VP of product management. And then I kind of took the full, jump in and started my own company, Anjuna.
Congratulations. You get that startup bug. You just have to itch it, right? Just got to do it.
That's it. Exactly.
So tell us a little about Anjuna. What gave birth to this idea? Tell us about the name. What do you want us to know about Anjuna?
Sure. So at a very high level, what Anjuna does is it allows enterprises to securely embrace the cloud. It allows them to basically kind of jump in and move every application that they have into the cloud. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but I guess the idea came to me because any place I've been throughout my career, I ran into that same problem. And it's essentially, how do you secure your applications on somebody else's servers? And I ran into that in the in the intelligence when I was in the intelligence community back in Israel. We ended up running code on in target countries, and we needed to make sure that that data and those applications remain extremely secure. And then when I moved to the private sector, we kept up running into that over and over again. When I was at OpenDNS and at Cisco, we ran into that problem. So I always knew I wanted to solve this extremely fundamental problem in security. And what essentially happened was that I reconnected with my co-founder, Jan Mikalevsky, that I've worked with, about 20 years ago in the intelligence community. And he finished his PhD at Stanford, and he finally found that there's a solution for this problem, this extremely, long and old problem that we've been working on. And we decided to join forces and start the company.
Great. Congratulations. We'll talk a little bit about your journey as a first-time entrepreneur. But before we do, let's go right into the topic today. And Carlos, please kick it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tulio, and thanks to our guest, of course. Today, we're going to be speaking about the confidential cloud. That's the topic. That's the conversation's name. The confidential cloud, new frontiers in data security. In other words, we're going to be answering the question, can the cloud ever be truly secure? So, Ayal, first of all, I'd like to ask you, why did you choose this particular topic, and why did you feel that it was relevant for this day and age in which we're all in?
Yeah, so there's a huge security problem in the cloud today, and you kind of see that there's a lot of people, companies trying to solve it. But as the cloud is getting more and more adoption, you see more and more companies that are either sort of only half in the cloud, so they move some applications but still remain a lot of still leave a lot of their applications in their data centers, or companies that are just sort of playing around with the cloud but haven't done the move yet. And a lot of financial services organizations are in that category, where they're sort of playing around with the cloud, they're moving a few things, but they haven't sort of jumped in. And the reason why this is happening is because what we sort of see now is that people are starting to move to the cloud, but security hasn't adopted. People are basically trying to take the security that they had in their data center that is based on specific assumptions. Like, once you're in, you're trusted, right? When it's your own data center, everybody that's in is an employee of the company, and all the servers are owned by the company, and all the applications are the application of the company. When you move to the cloud, none of that's true anymore, right? It's not your own people, it's not your own servers, you have other applications, but all the security tools and processes that people have at their disposal are these sort of old, security tools that fit a data center model. And this is such a burning need in security that the clouds themselves have noticed it. And they've added these sort of hooks allowing to, finally, do something about this problem, which is now is the right time for companies like us to build on top of these sort of hooks that the clouds have added to finally solve this problem and build a true model that is fit for the cloud.
Great. Thank you, Ayal. Tulio.
So let's play devil's advocate here a little bit.
Yeah,
so there are some pretty big players in this space. I mean, the cloud wars have been going on for almost a decade, right? Between AWS and Oracle and Salesforce, everyone's vouching, and even IBM, everyone's vouching for these kinds of clients. And everyone is claiming to be secure, and especially even in the healthcare with HIPAA compliance. So, what are you saying is that there are still gaps, even though they're making these claims? What are they, and how do you guys solve them?
Sure. Well, the fact that there are gaps, I think, is clear to everyone. I think one of the very recent breaches that got a ton of attention was the Capital One breach on AWS. Right, and Capital One had, Capital One is, fully adopted the cloud, and then specifically AWS. They've taken all their applications running, on top of AWS, and Capital One is an extremely, smart and forward-looking organization. Like, they're doing probably a better job than almost any other organization you can think of in terms of security and infrastructure. But then they've had this breach on AWS, and they've had their customer data stolen. So again, the fact that cloud security is not a solved problem, I think, is extremely clear to everyone. And the other thing is that we just talk to so many different CISOs and people that are basically saying, we want to adopt the cloud more, but we just can't because of security. I'll give you one example, or another one if we have the time. We're talking to the CISO of a Fortune 500 company. And they're using both. They've adopted the cloud. They're using both AWS and Azure, but they still have 200,000 servers in their data centers. And that CISO said, "I'd love to move more to the cloud. I don't want to manage these servers. I don't want to refresh them. I don't want to, spending a lot of time and money on doing that. But I just can't because of security. I can't move." He gave as an example their payroll application, and he said, "I can't move my payroll application into the cloud." Because of security, because I don't trust the employees of the public cloud, for example, not to get access to my payroll data. So we see these problems over and over again, and this is exactly what we can help solve.
Interesting. Yeah, there's definitely been quite a few hacks that have happened, and to big companies that you would think were secure, and especially when it comes to consumer data. So what is unique about what you guys are doing that, there's the private cloud, there's the public cloud, you talk about the confidential cloud. Tell us a little bit about this idea of the confidential cloud. What is unique about you guys that creates this confidential cloud?
Sure. So I guess at a high level, what we do is we take the security perimeter that, as I mentioned, the data center used to be around the entire sort of building again, that doesn't fit in the cloud. And what we do is we move the security perimeter to be around the applications themselves and the data of these applications. And what essentially that means is that organizations can just take, any application that they have and just move it on top of any cloud. And again, one of the other things we provide is we're a cross-cloud solution. So it doesn't matter if you're running on, AWS or Azure or GCP or pretty much any other cloud out there, it's going to work the same on every cloud. So this sort of creates this sort of notion of this confidential cloud. You can take any application, run it on any cloud in a way that's completely confidential and secure. And that just allows organizations to fully, embrace the cloud for the first time.
Okay, so I know, Carlos, you got a question. I just want to
Yeah.
quickly follow up, because what I'm gathering is you guys have basically created the concept, and excuse me if I'm oversimplifying this, the concept of a firewall at the edge of the cloud for each application. Is that a fair assessment? Because you protect the intrusion from happening. I mean, someone could get into the cloud, but if they can't get to the application, then they're basically just sitting there unable to execute anything. So is this the idea, is that you put the blockage before you enter the application? It's kind of like a firewall on the cloud to the application. I'm oversimplifying this again, but just want to clarify how it works a little bit better, a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's actually not. A firewall is one of those tools that you use at sort of the edge of that kind of was a very good fit for the data center, and then in the cloud,
Right.
it's not necessarily. But we actually do more than that. We essentially run the application in a way that even people with the employees of the cloud, even the government, if they come in with a subpoena and want to get physical access to the servers, hackers that might be running code with root access on these servers, none of them can access the application or the data of the application. And then we extend that protection even when the data leaves the application to go to storage or replication or to the network. The data is always protected, and essentially only the application itself has access to the data while it's processing it. And that's it. That's the only time anything has access to the data. And that's why it's such a great model for the cloud, because in the cloud, you just don't know who has access to anything, right? It's not your servers anymore. It's not your building. It's not, your people.
Got it. Brilliant.
Ayal, I have a question for you. I'm going to steer the conversation a little bit more towards the engineering part or development side, and because that's a very, very important component. I'd like to ask you about. Let me word my thoughts here. We've speak to a lot of people, a lot of to a very wide audience, which part of it is comprised of engineers. So I'm sure that a lot of the engineers out there who might be watching might have an interest in this. It is said that in terms of security, there's like a love-hate relationship between developers and security, and also considering the fact that last year, 2020, was disfigured by a broad range of cybersecurity incidents, ranging from Twitter to SolarWinds. Yep. In that context, what would you say that what cultural shifts need to happen, or can we make to avoid this in this year, in this 2021?
Yeah, no, great question. I think you're absolutely right. I think security has always been this, sort of this, naysayers, right? There's basically, sort of slowing down the organization or saying no to things, where the engineers want to move fast. They want to adopt new technologies, adopt the cloud, adopt more things, and the CISO or the security team is saying, no, we can't move this fast. And to some extent, this is exactly what I think. So this is not what security should be. Security should be an enabler rather than a disabler. Security should be able to say, as long as you do things this way, go run fast, do what you want to do. And I think, a lot of what we see with CISOs that we talk to is that they're in a very, very difficult spot, right? They're getting this huge amount of pressure from their engineers, from the CIO, from the CEO, from the board, to go and adopt these newer technologies, adopt the cloud, adopt containers. Organizations want to move fast, and it's critical for their business that they move fast. But then on the other hand, the CISO has this issue of saying, if we tell them, move fast and do this, we're assuming, a lot of risk. And it's sort of on risk that we don't necessarily even know about, right? We're just, doing the thing that we don't know about. We don't have the right tools to protect it. So they're sort of stuck in this, horrible position where they can't win, right? They either sort of slow down the organization, or they say yes and they take this, huge risk. And it's not only organizational risk, it's also personal risk for them. Because once there's a breach, the CISO is the one that's sort of left holding the bag and sort of is left, without a 7-figure job.
Great. Thank you, Ayal. Tulio, back to you, please.
So speaking of development, you guys are a startup. How have you gone about validating feature sets, functionality? Do you have a user group you work with? You do some A/B testing? What is your methodology that you've adopted to, align the sort of hypotheses with the reality of the marketplace, right? Everything is to be proven as a startup until you got a proof of concept. So what are some of the things you're learning from real clients about, hey, we have this idea, but this is kind of where we're really going? If you could share with us some of that experience, that'd be great.
Yeah. So it's funny, you're asking this question. I was thinking about, two things. One was the development itself and, the product and the features. And then the other one is sort of the hypotheses and is this the right solution for the market? Does this solve, a problem, a big enough problem that people care about? And then I was thinking that the answer to both is essentially similar in a sense. And it all goes to, as you sort of alluded to, it goes to talking to customers and talking to people that actually use this. And to me, again, I've spent most of my career, or I guess all my career, in building enterprise security products. And to me, I'm a huge believer in sort of in agile. But what I mean by agile is not the stand-ups or the 2-week sprints and all those sort of artifacts that people use to sort of call themselves agile. The sort of fundamental of being agile to me is, one, getting a lot of feedback into the process and then doing very quick iterations based on that process. And these two things are sort of the core things of basically solving what of knowing if what you're doing is in the right direction. And it goes both in terms of, talking to customers, seeing that you actually solve a big enough problem that they care about, that actually, helps them. And making sure that if that's not the case, you kind of change to a problem that they do care about, making sure you always provide value to your customers and being able to very quickly iterate on that. And then once you actually build the product, doing the same with the product. Making sure that the product itself solves that problem that they have, and if not, making the tweaks very, very quickly. And I think that's the number one thing that differentiates startups that are successful from startups that are not, is that ability to get that very quick feedback into the process all the time.
So I love your adoption of the original and traditional agile, right? Which is a lot of more independent thinking and thought process and innovation that gets smashed together, and then you make some quick iterations based on that knowledge base. How are you creating a culture that encourages that, and then how do you make decisions based on that independent thinking and that contributions? How do you prioritize those decisions? This is more of a question for potentially other startup CEOs or CTOs who sometimes struggle with adapting these methodologies, because there's a lot of freedom in these methodologies that can unchecked create chaos, right? So how have you sort of gone from many ideas, freedom in thinking, to collaborating and coming up with solutions that actually fit the market need? Is there a specific magic trick you work with that's worked for you guys?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot we can talk about culture that's sort of beyond sort of the sort of engineering culture, and that I'd love to talk about. But when it comes to that thing, I think what is important is not to be tied down to a specific process or a specific way of doing things. So something the best agile companies continuously kind of question themselves on how they do things, as long as they keep these sort of two very fundamental truths, which is we need to get a lot of feedback, from outside the building, or outside the Zoom calls now, in COVID days. But it's not going to be us sitting in a room coming up with things. We have to get that feedback from the outside. And number two is we have to, once we kind of get feedback and overwhelming feedback that, that we need to make a change, or there's something else that we need to do, is being able to take that feedback and incorporate that into, what the company does, into the product, into what it is that we do. And to me, as long as, if you're basically trying to make the engineers work a certain way, say, no, we have to do, 2-week sprints, or we have to do whatever it is, that takes away a lot of that agility, the ability to actually move fast. And for us, it's not about, we're not, there's no sort of, top down sort of way of how to do things. Each team can go and figure out what's the right process, what's the right methodology, how to do things, as long as they make sure that they get all that feedback in all the time, and that they're, constantly doing it. It's not, building this, 12-month, roadmaps and projects. and then executing on that without getting any feedback through that time. That just, you can do that if you're a large company, because it's not going to kill you. But if you do that as a startup, it can kill you.
I'd venture to say that's a mistake for large companies too. Carlos, I think you have a follow-up. You're on mute.
I am known as the mute guy, the one who mutes himself and forgets about it, right? That happens to me a lot. I was thinking as I was listening to you and we're discussing culture, and I also mentioned that a lot of our viewers are engineers. So in case there's someone out there who might be watching the show and might at some point be interested in even come work for you, what would you tell them? Why should they pursue an opportunity with Anjuna? Well, what makes Injuna a great company to work for, either now or in the future? What would you say to that? I'm very interested in that particular aspect. What makes it a cool company to work for?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. Actually, I spend a lot of my time thinking about this exactly. I think that's exactly what one of the things I should be doing as a CEO and a founder of a company. And I would say that it's two things. The first one is that we're solving, this huge, extremely important problem. And again, it's part of it is, if we're successful, we're this sort of huge company, but also just we enable, we move things forward. I've always viewed security as a way to enable other technologies, right? To some extent, if security is what enables e-commerce. You never would have had Amazon if people didn't trust, the internet enough to put their credit card in every website. And without security, you just wouldn't have the world that we have today. And what we're doing now is sort of that next big shift in security that is going to enable a lot of the technology. Some of them we're starting to see now, but some technologies that we can't even imagine. When the first algorithm came out that eventually enabled this, exchange of credit cards in the internet, nobody could have foreseen that, Amazon was going to be born as a result. And that's sort of part of what I love about being in security and what I love about solving one of the biggest problems that exist in security today. And number two, the second thing is I think one of the things that's really important to me is the company culture. And I think we've built a culture that I'm extremely proud to be a part of. And it finally goes down to, I'll tell you a story. I was, pre-COVID, I was so lucky enough to get a chance to speak in a small group with Eric Yuan, the founder of Zoom. And he talked about culture exactly the same way I'm thinking about it. I've basically sort of adopted what he's talking about. And he said, a lot of companies has these sort of 10, culture things on the wall, and they have all these sort of, and nobody reads it, nobody pays attention to it. What you write doesn't really matter in terms of the culture. It's actually what you do. And he said, we boiled it down to one word, and that's basically our culture. And that word is care. And the way he thinks about it, and the way how you think about it is, you want to care about your employees, you want to care about your customers. And that's like every decision that we make, we kind of view at it from that lens and making sure that we make sort of the right decisions that way. And I think that builds the right company culture.
I hear you. Totally. Yeah. Tulio,
absolutely. Please. Look, I mean, it's clear that in order to embrace the kind of environment where things are moving quickly and ideas are open and flowing, and they're being validated with customers, you have to care. You have to care to give people voice, both inside of the organization and outside, specifically those customers. And when you marry these two things, we've seen magic happen. We live it ourselves for the past 15 years as a company, and we've seen other companies do the same thing. So your journey, I mentioned earlier, we would ask you about your journey as an entrepreneur, as a startup entrepreneur. Anything, one or two things that you've learned about yourself in this process?
Yeah, I guess, well, it's funny. One of the things I've learned, and before I have two kids, and once I had kids, I had friends who didn't have kids that kept asking me, what it's like to have kids, right? And what I told them is, and it's very similar to to starting a company, is that it makes everything more extreme, right? Like the good is like amazing. You feel more love than you ever thought you could feel to anyone. You're like it's amazing. Nothing that you felt about you felt before, but then like the bad. It's just you wake up, like you find yourself like 4 a.m. Handling a leaky diaper, like you're thinking like why did I do this to myself, right? So everything is a lot more extreme, and it's sort of the same when you start a company. Like the good is amazing. When something goes well, it's like I've never felt anything like that in my career, as an employee of the company. But then when things go bad, it's like it's so emotional. It's so it's so tied to to how you think about yourself, who you are. You're just like it just makes everything a lot more extreme. And to me, that was sort of the big learning I've had. I was never, the kind of person to kind of, be up at nights, kind of worrying about, work. Once you start a company, and you have, people that depend on you, people that, it became, it just became a lot more stressful. But again, it's also in a good way, but also in a bad way.
All right. So, when you're in a company and something goes wrong, we as a team screwed up, right? When you're the founder, you screwed up. So
Exactly.
how do you get past that? Like what's been something that's helped you get past that and just keep going? How do you keep yourself motivated and the rest of the team motivated to keep going when that happens? And I'm asking this because there's a lot of people might be listening who are either on the fence about becoming an entrepreneur or early in it or going through a challenge right now, and they're kind of like, man, this is hard. How do I pick myself up? We love to hear from others who are paving the way. So words of wisdom you can share about how you pick yourself up when things go really bad to keep going.
No, I guess to me, some of the things is number one is the team. Is just having a great team around me, people that I trust, people that I, enjoy working with, people that can help, focus on what's important and what's not important. To me, that's a key piece of things. And I feel extremely lucky of the team that we've built. And that's definitely extremely helpful. And then it's just things outside of work. So again, having, my wife helps me out with, every time I have this sort of struggle, she's soundboard for me, which is extremely helpful. Having, great advisors. There are a lot of people out there that have done this in the past, that built extremely successful companies, and they're sort of paying it forward by helping, me, and I help, entrepreneurs that are in earlier stages that I am. And basically that network of people that they're helping other people that have been in that situation is extremely, extremely helpful. And if you're starting a company, I urge you to go find a few advisors that can help, and kind of walk you through things. And then you just get more resilient. It's funny, like I talk to people that have gone through things that are much more, stressful that I'm going through now, and they told me, yeah, like we were stressing out about things when we were earlier stage, and you get more and more resilient, but then the problems get bigger and bigger. So the fact that you're more resilient is actually helpful.
Excellent.
Ayal, as I was, we're about to wrap up, but as I was listening to you, I couldn't help but remembering when you made that analogy between running a startup or starting a business and being a parent. I couldn't help but remember it's a very old joke that in which someone asks somebody else that, how did you sleep? And the person responds, "Oh, I slept like a baby." "Oh, you mean 10 hours straight?" No. I woke up every 90 minutes crying.
Yeah, exactly. I never understood that phrase. I never understood the phrase, slept like a baby, especially, after having kids.
Yeah, babies don't sleep.
Yeah, they wake up every 60, 90 minutes and they're all crying. Well, anyway, I just thought of it. I thought it would be a good, but I hear you. I hear you about the startup world and what it entails and the price that we need to pay it sometimes. But I definitely look forward to being witness to your success and to stay in touch. So that's all I have for today, Tulio, with our guest.
Look, Ayal, it's loud and clear. Don't go at it alone, right? So if you're listening, take the advice of those going through it. Don't go at it alone. Surround yourself with people who can be supportive, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Yes. So, Ayal, it's been great to have you. We'll definitely keep up with your success. We wish you a lot of luck and success. Just stay with us as we go off the air. Before we do that, Carlos, what do we got coming up? We got anything else coming up the rest of the week?
Yes, one more conversation, Tulio. That'll be tomorrow, same time, 12 noon Pacific. And the conversation is going to be with Vic Bakru, the Chief Operating Officer at Consejo Sano, which is a health tech platform. And the topic is going to be scaling an equitable digital scaling an equitable digital health business. That's the topic that we have for tomorrow, right here on Dojo Live. And then, of course, next Monday, on the recap show, we do every Monday, in which we'll be recapping this conversation with Ayal and the one tomorrow with Vic. That's what we have, gentlemen. And that's all I have for today.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.